What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. So I'm going to label this match the inconsistency of youth, because that's what this was. It's a good performance from a bunch of players that we've not seen many good performances from this season. And that's basically where we are as a club right now. Most of that, again, is down to Boley and his terrible transfer tactics. But I think we're seeing, when we're at home especially, we tend to see a better version of a lot of these players. And I think a lot of that is just down to they're young. I think it's difficult for them to go on the road, and you're already facing these better teams that have these very fast, aggressive players, and then you're met with the aggressive crowd coming at you. I think it can lead to a bit of nervousness as compared to whenever you're playing at home. Every challenge, every tackle, every clearance, every block is met with this roarish cheer, and it motivates you a bit. So I think that difference, it affects a lot of these players, and it affects them in a lot of ways that I think the more experienced players, you look at Silva, they don't tend to be perplexed, I guess is the best word. I had to think about what I was looking for there. But I mean, I think that's what makes a player like Palmer one of our better players, because he is not one that tends to be put off by the opposing crowd, even when we're away. A lot of these guys are, though, and that's why we've seen a lot of very poor performances on the road, in my opinion. Now, looking at Pochettino, I mean, there's not really much to say good or bad about him in this one. I mean, his lineup was basically picked for him. You know, this time I can't really complain about him playing Badiashile because we don't have any other options unless we go to our youth team. So outside of playing an inexperienced youth player that we've not seen at all this season, we basically had to pick this starting lineup. You know, the only one that you could maybe have a shout for would be Caicedo, possibly coming in for either Mudryk or Madueke. But even then, I mean, he's not really shown much more than they have. In fact, he's, in my opinion, shown a little bit less. So, yeah, I mean, the starting lineup, it picks itself. He did his job fine, it seems like, as far as motivating, because the players did seem to go out and want to win this game and want to perform. So on that side of things, he'd seem to do okay. So it's very much he did his job fine, but it's not like he had a whole lot of tough decisions to make, to be honest. But looking at the game overall, it very much was a game of we were in control. We had a very good first half. Tottenham had a pretty poor first half. Second half, Tottenham stepped it up a little bit. We were still good. And I think it's one of those games that on another day might have gone a bit different, because there were some chances that we missed, so it could have been a blowout, but also there were some chances they missed, so it could have been a draw or a win for them. It's a very back and forth game. Today, though, we had a bit more of the luck. We had a bit more of the work ethic throughout most of the game that I think led to, all right, comfortable win. But again, getting the clean sheet, I think, is probably the biggest accomplishment that this, honestly, just looking at this defense, I think that's the biggest accomplishment they could have had, because when you're looking at that defense, not a great defense. I mean, the only player that's different from the 5-0 loss is that Chalobah comes in for Disasi because he's hurt. The other three were all involved in that 5-0 crushing at Arsenal. So to think that that same back line with one player switched out suddenly keeps a clean sheet against Tottenham, it's not exactly something that I think a lot of people would think could happen. Maybe the optimists would look at this and think, yeah, sure, that could happen. But when you look at it realistically or pessimistically, I don't think majority of people would have thought that this was a clean sheet type of game. Especially, I mean, Tottenham just coming off a very narrow loss against Arsenal, you know, and one where they nearly came back and won it or drew in the second half. I mean, it's very surprising to think that we managed to keep them quiet for most of the game. And outside of a few moments of poor finishing, I mean, their chances were a lot of we blocked it, or they were poor chances, or bad crosses, or we blocked their crosses. I mean, it was a lot of us making them make mistakes. Very few times did they make the mistake unforced. So I think that's a real commendation for not only how the defense performed, but also how our midfield performed. Because a lot of the time, I think there's way too much time for somebody to have a shot outside the box because the midfield is nowhere to be found. So we'll talk about individuals now, starting, of course, with Petrovic. Now, he didn't really have any world-class saves to make today, so it's really hard to judge him. I would say he did his job perfectly fine, didn't make any mistakes, but he didn't really get called into question throughout most of this game. Looking at our defense, Gilchrist on the right side wasn't phenomenal, but was solid. He looks solid back there, and I think he's growing. Because the thing about it is, I look at him and I look at Cucurella. They're very similar in their style of defending. They both just go flying into challenges. They go in, they put high pressure. They're constantly all over the players. And sometimes that leads to you go flying out there and then you get turned too easily. And it happens to Cucurella a lot. And I think it happened to Gilchrist quite a bit at times tonight with Son over there. I think it showed that he is still a little naive when it comes to defending. The reason why I'm not as upset with him when he doesn't compared to Cucurella is he's still young. Cucurella obviously is also not old. I think he's 24 maybe. So he's at least mid-20s. He's not late 20s. He still should be at a point in his career now where he knows not to go do that. Gilchrist, he's just starting his Premier League career this year. So for him to go flying into challenges and get turned, I can't really blame him for that because he's got to learn from it. Cucurella has already done it many times, not just this season, but last season. Probably did it a bit for Brighton as well, and he still hasn't learned from it. So that's why I'm a bit more frustrated with Cucurella when he does it compared to Gilchrist. But I think overall, you look at those, both of them tonight. I think Cucurella had a bit easier of a time because not that Johnson's a bad player, but definitely tonight Johnson was not nearly as dangerous as Son was. And honestly, even then, Son wasn't really involved as much as he normally is. So I think Cucurella did have it a bit easier because Johnson just seemed like he was a bit off the pace and Cucurella was hurrying him up and making him make a few mistakes here and there. So yeah, I think because of that, Cucurella had probably one of his better performances. And I think he has these performances in him. He's done this before where he's been so just all over players that even though they do occasionally get the better of him, occasionally turn him, he's still so aggressive that he's back on them in an instant and they don't really know how to cope with it. And they start to get a little frustrated. They start trying to force it. And I think that's kind of what happened tonight. So in the nights whenever he does manage to get into the winger's head and does manage to put them off a bit, he does look really good. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen enough for me to say that I'm okay with Cucurella now. But Chalobah and Badiashile in the center. Badiashile, not a terrible game for him. I mean, I'm still looking at the rest of his season and going, he's not going to cut it for us. But I think tonight was one of his better performances because I don't really remember much from him. And I think as a defender, if you remember them for their clearances and their blocks, that's a good night. If you don't remember them, that's a they did their job type of night. And if you remember them for all of the mistakes, obviously that's a bad night. So most of this season has been remembering him for his bad mistakes. Tonight, I don't really remember much from him, which is a step in the right direction. Now, does this mean he's turned his season around? Probably not. But it's a good thing to see he can still put in a solid performance that makes it to where I don't remember him making any mistakes. We need more of that, if I'm being honest. Chalobah on the other side, obviously the goal, fantastic header. Outside of that, I do remember a few good challenges, some good clearances as well. There were several moments where it felt like he was the one in the center. It was a very odd lineup at times because it felt like Cucurella was stepping into the midfield whenever we had possession. And so it almost became Chalobah was in the center, Badiashile slid more left, and Gilchrist was a bit more central. So it was very odd, but Chalobah being more central, I think allowed him to be kind of a sweeper at times. He was really just back there to use his pace and his strength and come in and block any crosses that were looking dangerous. And I thought he did that very well. So yeah, overall, really good performance. He was probably our best defender of the night. But getting into our midfield, this is where things were a bit interesting to watch tonight because I think it does give a bit more insight into Caicedo as a player because this was another really good performance from him. And that rule of three, if it happens once or twice, it's still coincidental. If it happens a third time, there's a pattern. I think we're seeing a pattern here. When Caicedo and Gallagher are both in the center, I think Caicedo looks better. Now, why that is, it's hard to say. Thinking about it, I had a sit down after the game and really thought about what could be causing that. I've come up with a few possible reasons. First, he's still a bit younger. He's still got a lot of pressure on him. Obviously, the money that he came in with, there's a lot of pressure on him. So the idea that he is the sole ball winner, you think about like the Conte role or the was it Makalele? I think Makalele was the one that sort of started that role. You think about that type of role, that's a big responsibility. And if you don't do it, it can really hurt the team as a whole. With Fernandez in there, he is the sole ball winner. Fernandez is not in there to win the ball. He's in there to be the playmaker. So maybe the responsibility of being the sole ball winner is overwhelming for him. And so because of that, it's hard for him to really get his motivation up and push himself to be that ball winner. The other possibility is that Gallagher being in there, his work rate, his work ethic sort of inspires Caicedo, because that can happen sometimes. We've seen some players that are so motivational with how hard they're working, they bring the rest of the team with them. I think Gallagher is one of those players at times, except most of the time he's doing it further up the field. When he's doing it deeper and sitting in there with Caicedo, but I think maybe that could motivate him when he's in there with Gallagher to push up a bit more and really try to bust it, to go and win tackles. The final thought I had is maybe when it's him and Fernandez, in his mind, he's got to stay central, because Fernandez sort of has license to roam, go get on the ball, make things happen, which means he needs to stay central and be sort of a buffer for the defense. With Gallagher in there, he's able to sort of more freely roam and be defensive in that mindset, because Gallagher, if Caicedo leaves to go put a challenge in on somebody, he knows Gallagher's going to be there to cover that space. Whereas with Fernandez, who knows where he's going to be? He could be a bit further down the field. He could be on the other side of the field, after just making a pass that gave it away or whatever. I think there's a possibility for all three of those that could be why he looks better when he's paired with Gallagher in there. Whatever the case, though, again, I mean, we are seeing Caicedo at his best in these past couple of matches where it's been him and Gallagher. I mean, he was all over the field tonight. He was making challenges, putting in great blocks. The only problem I have with him at this point is his passing needs to improve, because there are a few moments whenever he's looking to get the ball down the field and get somebody in behind, and he overhits it most of the time. But I mean, his defensive work rate is why, at least everybody said, why we went and got him tonight. And I think the game against Villa, the second half at least, I think we saw this is the type of player we were going to get from him. So if he can keep doing this, and again, I don't know why the reason is that he and Gallagher as a pairing seems to bring out the best in him, but if that's what it takes, I think that's what you have to do for Pochettino's point of view. You have to get the best out of Caicedo, because when you do, it does make things a lot easier for your defense. I mean, there were so many moments whenever he's making a good challenge and the defense doesn't even have to worry about anything anymore because Caicedo's there. So Gallagher, for his side of things, I thought he did well. He's just an engine in there. He still has some gaps in his game, still not the perfect player, but he is the perfect motivator, in my opinion, because watching him play, it's very similar to like an Aspilicueta. When you think about captain material, your best captains are the ones that they're organizing, they're talking to everybody, they're getting in their ear, really getting behind all of their teammates. But the other type of captain that I think goes under the radar a bit are the ones that they wear the armband and they are just so motivational with how hard they're working. You watch them play, you watch how hard they're just moving up and down the field, getting behind the ball, making challenges, working hard to win the ball and then get it down the field. I mean, it is really motivational to have a teammate like that. And I think that's why sometimes those type of players get the captain's armband, because they are good motivators for the rest of the team based on how hard they work for their teammates. So yeah, it was a very good midfield tonight. And I think that's where a lot of our success came from, because the only way Tottenham were getting any joy was to get the ball out wide. And even then, like I said, we were doing a good job of cutting out those crosses. So, but going further up the field, you got, once again, Mudryk, Madueke, and Palmer. And I think overall, solid from Madueke and Mudryk. I think there's still problems. I think Mudryk, he's still got an issue when it comes to finishing. And I will say I was very frustrated in the second half. There was a moment he gets the ball and Jackson's wide open in the middle of the field. All he has to do is just pass it to him. He tries this chip lob thing and it goes right at the keeper. That moment, from then on, he did nothing. It was like that moment just deflated his morale, and he was non-existent for the next like 15 minutes until he came off. So very frustrating to see that happen, because you want your players to be a bit more mentally tough than that. You make a mistake, go and do it again, and don't make the mistake next time. But he was just walking around. There were several moments where he was right there. He could have put in a challenge, and he didn't. And Tottenham came right back at us. For Madueke, I mean, once again, just selfish at times. His work rate is better. He's doing better to work for the team at times, because he did get back and make some good defensive blocks and challenges. But on the ball is where he still really struggles to get it out of his mindset that he has to score, and or even just he has to show off, because there were several moments where it felt like he was trying to do too much on the ball. So still frustrated with him, but tonight was a better overall performance than some of the ones that I've seen this season. For Palmer, I mean, it was another pretty performance from him. He didn't look that great against Villa, so I don't know if it's just a fitness thing since he was out with illness. Maybe it's just the illness still sort of bugging him a bit, but he definitely was not the same level that we expect to see from him. There were quite a few moments where he should have had a great shot, put it on target, tested the keeper, and he didn't. I even think about, the moment where Jackson was in, bounces off of, Vicario, and then Van de Ven goes and kicks it to Palmer. I feel like a more aware and a more informed Palmer probably settles it and just taps it in, but instead it was like it caught him off guard that the defender kicked it right at him. And I just don't think Palmer on form would make that sort of mistake. So thankfully we didn't need him tonight, but I think it's something where when he is more in form, I think this is a night where we might blow out Tottenham. And I think that would be more motivating for the team. But for Jackson, though, I mean, it's another performance that is kind of typical for him, where he's working hard, he's getting into the right spaces, but he's just not finishing. And I mean, obviously he scored the second goal, but that type of goal is typical of him. Like it's the product of what he does well, which is Palmer takes a shot off the crossbar. He's one of the few reacting, because he does like to get into those spaces. So I really do appreciate all the hard work he does, but man, there's just so many moments, and it can't keep happening for him as a striker. You cannot keep missing the chances he's getting and not expect there to be some flack, because how many one-on-one chances with keepers has he not finished this season? So it really needs to improve in that sense, because he does get in those spots so often. We need to see some sort of improvement. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like he's getting any better. It seems like every single time it's the same thing. He puts it right at the keeper, basically. I mean, this one he tries to go up under him. So, but with all that being said, I mean, it is, again, this is not necessarily like we're turning the season around. Like this, it's a product of the inconsistency that we have. We could very well go into the next match and get crushed by West Ham, and now all of a sudden they're chasing Europe instead of us. So I think it's a good result. I think it was a good performance. However, we've had our good results and good performances this season that have been followed up by absolutely abysmal performances. But for me, I mean, it's another good game this season, but it's not really a sign of progress. Until we can see a consistent, good performance every single week, every single game, until we're seeing that, I don't think we're seeing progress. Because again, I said it after the Everton game. We needed to take that momentum, take that great result and good performance, take that into the next game. And that's the one thing Pochettino's not been able to do with us. We'll see. It's another one where, good performance, good result. Can we take it to the next match? After Everton, we went and lost to Man City, and then we went and got thumped by Arsenal. So clearly we did not take that good result into the next match. Will we take this one? There's no telling. So I will mention, just because obviously there were a few subs, to be perfectly honest, I mean, for Caicedo, he didn't really show too much for me personally. I just, watching him play, he seems like he's a little too slow for this league. There's that that feeling of he's always behind the play a little bit. He's always a few steps behind because he's a little too slow to catch up. So he's got to increase his speed if he really wants to have a good chance to perform. I'm going to struggle with these names because I'm honestly, when they first came on, I'm like, how do you even pronounce that? Achiampong, I think, was the first one. Achiampong or something like that. He came in for Gilchrist. A couple of decent blocks. Seems energetic. Seems like he might have a little something to his game. Also, seemed to be a pretty decent size too. I think he was only maybe 18, 17, something like that. So he already has a decent bit of size on him. I don't know if he typically plays center back or fullback, but he came on and, like I said, made a couple of good blocks, really threw himself in front of shots and crosses. So it's good to see from a youngster that he's willing to get out there and really put his body on the line. And then the last one, Tarianian or something like that. I don't even know. I mean, he was just out there for a little bit. It was kind of a last minute sub just to waste some time. So didn't see too much from him. I'm pretty sure I saw him play in preseason and was just sort of not too wowed by him. But I mean, we have a lot of young players coming through that obviously have a lot of promise. So it'll be interesting to see if they get much more time, especially considering, I mean, we don't have much backup right now because of injury. So, and of course, that's once again on the physio team that we cannot seem to keep anybody fit for long periods of time. So the final thing I do want to talk about, though, because I've mentioned them in the past, has it been the past 2 Chelsea videos or just the last one? I think I mentioned them in the last 2. But the women, now throwing away their season. Obviously, after the Barcelona game, it felt like they were robbed by the referees. I had a obviously big rant about how bad the referee was in that game. The Liverpool match was just pathetic. And I think, first of all, it kind of shows, because we're seeing it with Liverpool, the men's Liverpool team. We're seeing it there too. I know it's hard because if you're on your last year of your contract as a manager, obviously people are going to start talking if you haven't signed a contract about halfway through the season. People are going to be talking about, are they on their way out? But to announce, I mean, she announced it, Emma did, at the beginning of the season, I'm pretty sure, and Klopp announced it almost just about halfway through that they were both leaving. And I think it's shown that it doesn't really work. It doesn't like a lot of people are saying, oh, the players are going to be motivated to help them end their career here with a lot of trophies, with a lot of wins. That's not been the case. I mean, the women are ending up with no trophies. Liverpool only got the Carabao Cup, and that was just because they faced us in the final, and we were awful. I mean, if they had faced a slightly more motivated and slightly better team, a team that was able to finish, they wouldn't have won the Carabao Cup. So, but yeah, some of it is, I think, Emma announcing that she's leaving. I think when you hear that the manager who's been here for a long time, who's been successful for a long time, when you hear that they're leaving, I think for a lot of players, one, it does make them tune out their motivational speeches a little bit. And you sit there and you think, well, they're not going to be here next season, so why do I care if they don't like me or not? It's going to be somebody new. So they may not be fully willing to fight for the coach like, players who are fighting to earn their position for next season possibly. And also, I think some of the players we brought in have just not been good enough. I look at players like Lawrence. I look at players like Parasay. I look at players like, I mean, honestly, I still think James is a bit of a overhyped, lazy player. I don't even know if she played in that Liverpool match anyway. But it feels like some of the players we've brought in have just not been to the quality that we've needed. And obviously, Kerr getting injured was a big loss because she was such an enormous player for the team before this. So it's just been a very rough season. And for me, this kind of completes the bully destruction, of Chelsea, because the women, at least last year, they had their victories. They won their trophies. So it still felt like, okay, well, at least the women didn't suffer. And then this season, it's just, I know it's not been wholly him, but when you really think about it, I mean, that's the men are not going to win anything this season, and now the women are not going to win anything this season. You came into this club where we have won something on either the men or the women's side for a while now, as far as I can remember. I mean, we've been successful in the women's game for a while. Men's game, obviously, we've not won the league in a while. We've had trouble in the domestic cups. We did win the Champions League right before Bowley came in, but we've been competitive. We've been getting into the Champions League. And then Bowley comes in, first season with the men, we don't make Europe. We're out of Europe, don't win any trophies, embarrassing. And then now with the women, last season for Emma Hayes, chance to go all the way, win the Champions League, and they don't win anything. So very disappointing. And yeah, we need to get these owners out and get somebody in who actually cares about this club and wants to make it good and not just make a profit. Don't know how many times I got to say it, but we'll say it again. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the game today? Let me know what you talk about and discuss, all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Chelsea reviews. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.